The Florida Gators take on the Miami Hurricanes in the Swamp to get the 2024 season underway. Need I say more? One we've been looking forward to all preseason long comes to a head on Saturday, August the 31st, 3:30 Eastern Time, when the Gators and Canes do battle. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Phillips. He's Dave Shumate. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, SECUnfiltered.com. We're brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Guys, go to prizepicks.com. Use promo code SECU at sign up to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 or more lineup. Again, guys, that's prizepicks.com. Promo code SECU at sign up to get your $50 bonus today. It's Florida against Miami. Does it need any more hype than that? I'm Chris Phillips. He's Dave Shumate. We are breaking down one of the most highly anticipated matchups of week one. You want kickoff, you want bad blood, you want rivalry, you want hot seat chatter. You're going to get it all in this one, and we can't wait to see toe meet leather and what feels like a must-win game for both sides. Again, we're previewing, we're predicting, we're breaking it all down. Dave Shumate, my good friend, helping me do so. Dave, what's going on, my man? As you can tell, I'm fired up for this one. We're going to be in attendance, by the way, for this one. We're going to be in the Swamp, taking this thing in firsthand. My friend, cannot wait to break this one down with you.
No, I mean, it kind of feels like Edge, Matt Hardy, 2004, 2005, loser leave town. We got Lita on the line for the people who used to watch WWE. I don't anymore, but I used to at that time. It kind of has a loser leave town feel to it. It may not end up being that. They both may keep their job, but it does feel like the loser is going to feel really bad leaving this one. You're going to feel really bad. And your next game, I think, for Miami would be Virginia Tech. That would be a must-win. And then Florida would be sitting at a must-win for A&M. So, I don't know. I'm with you. I think this is the most intriguing game from week one just because of it is a must win, I feel like, for both these teams. It's so early in the year. You hate saying that week one, but from a momentum standpoint, and momentum is important as it is as ever it is in college football. Because, again, I mean, if you get off the tracks early, you have 2 or 3 losses before September or mid-October, it's tough to keep the team's attention at this point. I know we got 12-team playoff, but that early, especially transfer portal, guys start looking out for themselves a little bit. You got to keep the train on the tracks early in the season, especially with these two teams that I think have their 2 most talented rosters, both coaches, Mario Cristobal and Billy Napier, have ever had at their respective schools. I think most people would agree with that. I mean, to be fair to Miami, they improved in every category, offensively and defensive last year, with Shannon Dawson and Lance Guidry over as the defensive coordinator. Again, Shannon Dawson, the OC. Florida making a couple of changes there on the coordinator side, bringing in Ron Roberts from Auburn to help Austin Armstrong on the defensive side of the ball. Billy sounds like, I'm not going to say he's going down with the ship, but he's going to do it his way. He's calling the offense. It's interesting. Little cat-mouse games can be hot, 3:30 kickoff, 2:30 Central. I mean, I'm fired up about it. I mean, the storylines of this game are through the roof. I mean, they really are. But what makes me fired up is we're going to see a lot of good players. Because, again, I'm a personnel guy. I love watching the personnel. And these are the 2 best rosters these coaches have had during their times at their respective schools.
So, Dave, let's set the scene for this one really quickly. Gators and Hurricanes, Saturday, August the 31st at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on ABC. Of course, like I mentioned, the game in Gainesville, Florida at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, better known as the Swamp. And like we just mentioned, Dave, we can call this one the SEC Unfiltered Tour Game of the Week presented by our friends at Prize Picks. Because, again, yours truly will be in the Swamp. My first ever game down in Gainesville. Cannot freaking wait. I can't think of a better way to break it in than this one. Rivalry game matchup. The 19th ranked Hurricanes are a 2.5-point favorite in this game. So the spread's just under a field goal. Close spread. The over-under set at 54.5. The series history, Miami leads this one 29-27. But the last meeting, the Gators got the best of the Canes. 2019, they won this game 24-20. Did Florida. And Dave, you mentioned the hype around Miami. It is real. They're looked at as one of the favorites to win the ACC. Went 7-6 last year, 3-5 in the conference. Lost to Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl, for those that remember that. 10 starters are back on this team, but I think the excitement, Dave, really comes from what they added via the portal. Cam Ward, the quarterback from Washington State. I've seen people, Dave, picking him to win the Heisman. I mean, you talk about the hype around him. You had Damian Martinez from Oregon State, the running back. He was first team All Pac-12 last year. You know, you're going to be good on the offensive line. You've got weapons at wide receiver, Restrepo and Green, who are back. Reuben Bain Jr. is back on the defensive front. He was the ACC Rookie of the Year defensively in 2023. Akeem Mesdor is back at edge. Francisco Magoa, I believe is how you say his last name. He's back at linebacker, had 18 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. You did lose a couple safeties. I think that's something to watch in this game with Cameron Kitchens and James Williams, and Kinchens, by the way, excuse me. Cameron Kinchens and James Williams. But Darryl Porter Jr. is back at corner. You picked up a Marshall transfer and a Washington transfer to help fill out in the secondary. And like I mentioned, Dave, there's a lot of pressure on Mario Cristobal because there's a lot of talent on this football team. Coming into year 3, by far his best squad. Dave, Miami's a team you have broken down. You've done a deep dive on them. Your thoughts on the Hurricanes? Are they worth the preseason hype they're getting? Again, ranked 19th in the country coming in the year. And do you view them as one of the top contenders in the ACC and maybe a contender for the college ball playoff as well?
They're my pick to win the ACC going into the year. They are.
I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah, they're my pick. And again, I'm not sold on Mario Cristobal as a game day coach. Phenomenal recruiter. Game day?
Who can forget the Georgia Tech game last year? Let's just throw that out there.
Dude, that stresses me out just even thinking. I was thinking about it while you were just introducing us, really. I was thinking in my head, I was like, because I was doing a preview and I saw their center from last year, Matt Lee, that image where they got cut to him and he was just like, what the F are we doing? Like, that was one of the more baffling ones. But, I mean, anyways, I think last year outside of that, if they just win that game, we're probably talking about them a little different. I think people are probably more on the train of picking them to win the ACC. And I think some people are too. I'm not the only one. I'm not saying that's some bold take. Some people, Miami's favored by 2 in this game, and it's a road game. But I think Shannon Dawson, OC, good offensive coordinator. I mean, the offense took a massive jump from 2022 to last year, going from 97th in scoring offense to 39th last year. It's all about points these days. Total offense, total defense are relevant. Then I think our guy Lance Guidry, their defensive coordinator, he came in as well. They were 68th in FBS and scoring defense last year. They moved up to 45th. Not awesome, but it's definitely an improvement. Like you mentioned, you added some big portal additions. Just specifically going off defense. You obviously have your edge guys. You didn't add these, but these are your returners. Reuben Bain Jr., Akeem Mesdor, you mentioned them. I think Wesley Basante, I remember recruiting him, I think, at Miami Carroll's High School is where he's from. Good player. He'll help. You mentioned Francisco Magoa. I think other guys that are going to have to step up, though. I think you're going to have 2 guys coming over from the Pac-12 to keep an eye on. Michelle Powell over at the free safety spot and Isaiah Taylor, both coming from Arizona and Washington, respectively. Those will be 2 guys. They're going to have some help on the back end. They got a new corners coach, I believe, in Chevis Jackson coming over from Marshall. So that'll be key. Deani Hill, also another kid at the cornerback spot to keep an eye on. I don't know how overall deep this roster is. Remember, they got Tyler Barron now, too, who I feel like in the offseason was at, 3 or 4 different schools. Was it Ole Miss and Louisville? Now he's at Miami. He's a guy they added late. So depth there will be interesting. Damari Brown's a kid I've been around. He's their backup corner. He was our starting corner at UCF. You mentioned, obviously, the headliners. But overall, I think these rosters are very similar. They're very similar across the board. Depth's probably about the same. Front-end starters are about the same. But, yeah, I like Miami just due to schedule really to go win the league. I think this is Mario Cristobal's best opportunity to win the ACC. I just really like them for really what Shannon Dawson and Lance Guidry are as coordinators. I think they take that next step. They have some better weapons, some better pawn pieces. I think they go win the ACC. Now, whatever that would mean your record would be in the SEC, I do think, though, they do take that next step. I like the Hurricanes this year. People will be like, what about Mario Cristobal and his game day decisions? I'm with you. You're not wrong on that. He is not a great game day coach, but we've seen bad game day coaches win championships, win a lot of football games before in a single season. We've seen it with Les Miles, Ed Orgeron. We've seen it before. This isn't some he's a bad game day coach last year. He made a mistake last year. There's no way they'll be good this year. It's like, well, they improved the roster. I think their coordinators are both good. I think Miami takes that next step in year 4 for Mario? Yeah. So best roster. Again, that's the main thing for me. I love seeing that these are the best 2 rosters that both these coaches have had across the board. But I think Miami is the favorite, at least for me, heading into the ACC in 2024.
Dave, do you know what the nickname of this rivalry used to be? Or at least what
No,
they battled for? If you played the old school NCAA football video games, then you'd probably be well
dude, I
aware.
know what you saying. I'm going to be, damn it. What is it?
The battle for the Seminole War Canoe. That was the trophy. Now it's the Florida Cup. Seminole War Canoe is a lot cooler. But, Dave, the nickname of this game should be the Hot Seat Bowl because that's essentially what's taking place here in Gainesville. I'll ask you this, Dave. Who do you think, you look at the two dynamics. Both coaches entering year 3. One has, I think it's safe to say, the toughest schedule in college football, but there's no excuses at Florida, right? But what's the number? What's the win number you got to get to? 7 wins, maybe 8. In Miami, they're talking about getting the ACC title game, maybe going to a college football playoff. So, who do you think needs this one more? Mario Cristobal or Billy Napier?
If you put my feet to the fire and you had, I mean, obviously they both need it, but like you said, if we're really asking here, who needs it more? I'd probably say Napier, just because I think Miami could probably lose this game and still go win the ACC potentially. I mean, that wouldn't show me similar to kind of what Utah did a couple years ago, right? They went and won the Pac-12, I think, the year after that same year they lost in Billy's first game at Florida, coincidentally. But yeah, because I think Billy's just got so many other games. I mean, dude, you know just as I do, Chris. If they lose this game, that A&M game 2 weeks later at home, the SEC opener,
as must win as
almost
it gets.
that literally will be a must win. I mean, if he starts 1-2 and you still have the month of November sitting ahead of you in Georgia, dude, that would not be looking good. I mean, Miami's schedule isn't really that different. I mean, I'm pulling it up now. So it's Florida A&M, Ball State, South Florida. Virginia Tech would probably be that next big one. I mean, I still think South Florida will be decent, but the big one would be Virginia Tech after that. Cal, Louisville, Florida State, Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Syracuse. Yeah, a lot more opportunities to go get some wins and go get a chance to go build your resume to go be in Charlotte to play for that ACC title game. It's definitely a much more important game for Billy Napier, must-win game for Billy Napier, just because I think just off schedule alone.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Dave. I think it's a bigger game for Billy Napier. It's a rivalry game at home. That's a huge part of this. I also think, to your point, I mean, I have Miami losing this game and going 11-1 and making the playoff.
Dude, you totally see that.
So I think Miami could lose this game, still win out, still win the ACC, still make the college football playoff. For Florida to get to 6 wins, to get to a bowl game, Dave, it feels like this one has to be one of the 6. It really does. To set the tone for the year, this year's so important for Billy. We all know that. This Florida fan base, I mean, I've been told by Florida folks, if they lose this one, right, wrong, or indifferent, there will be some Gators that will just check out on Billy Napier, and they won't come back till things get better, a.k.a. Florida wins 8 or 9 games. They just, right, wrong, or indifferent, the entire Billy Napier era to this point is hinging on this game. That's how important it is. So as we look at the game, Dave, specifically, I think the big question coming in, what's the status of Montrell Johnson, right? We know there's no more Trevor Etienne. Montrell Johnson suffered the injury during fall camp. We don't know at this moment, time of recording, his status. And the offensive line, you've talked about him. Is there reason to be concerned? You're already kind of worried about getting pushed. So what do you see for the Gators offense, specifically the run game, if Montrell Johnson can't go, or even if he goes and he's, let's say, 80%, and you got some questionable, some questions on the offensive line, that alone, Miami's defensive front could cause some real problems in this game.
No, you're exactly right, Chris. I mean, you're sitting there, if you're Florida, I think Trayon Webb is going to have to come on, their backup RB2 heading into the season right now. He's going to come on at some point to help them. I don't know if he's ready to go be that dude in the first week of the season. Plus, factor in the right side of the offensive line, I don't think is where Florida wants it to be. Again, that left side's fine. That left side is fine. They had that set right there. You got Barber, Najee Harris, and then you got Jake Slaughter in that center spot. They're fine right there. It's when they moved, as we all remember last year at right tackle. Go back and watch the Utah game. Damian George struggled in tackle. Too heavy-footed. He's a 330-pounder. They moved him inside. I don't think that, and I was wrong. I thought the adjustment would be good for him. I mean, Nick Saban's raved. He hated he left. But when he was at Alabama, because he was previously at Alabama. But I don't think that's been there. I don't think Crenshaw Dixon has really taken that right tackle spot that they thought, the San Diego State transfer, the offensive tackle spot. I don't think he's taken that by the horns yet like they thought. Still some communication errors. You're right. I mean, Miami's got guys that are going to give them trouble right off the bat in week one, especially if you're having trouble at your tackle spots on the right side. I mean, there's no question about it. Ruben Bain, like we mentioned, and then Akeem Messidor is the other one. Sorry, I was looking at that. But no, you also got to factor in, like you mentioned, Trevor Etienne. He was one of your more playmakers in the passing game as well. Outside of Eugene Wilson, Trey Wilson, whatever you want to call him, they don't really have a lot of proven playmakers yet. I mean, I'm like Cole. I'm high on Elijah Badger, the Arizona State transfer as well. But outside Trey Wilson, there's really no proven playmakers that can have home run ability and take it 50, 60 yards. And you know, Chris, it's an explosive play game. You got to create explosive plays. You got to limit explosive plays on defense. It's tough for you to just go have 10, 11 play drives and be really good on third down and extend plays. Where does Florida get that home run ability? I don't see it on the roster right now outside of Trey Wilson and maybe the Arizona State transfer Elijah Badger. I'm interested to see the Lance Guidry, Billy Napier battle between these two coordinators on Florida's offense going against Miami's defense.
And to your point, Dave, you know, you talk to folks like our good friend Chris Doring, who played wide receiver at Florida, and some other, they're high on the receiver position. It's a lot of unknown, but they like the talent in the room. You mentioned Badger. Trey Wilson, obviously, I think is going to be a dude. He's got a tall task replacing Ricky Pearsall. But that brings me to this, sticking with the Florida offense really quickly, Dave. You know, the knock against Graham Mertz, he exceeded all expectations last year. I mean, he was as good as he possibly could have been, in my opinion. I mean, it just across the board, so much better than we all thought he'd be. The one knock was he doesn't push the ball downfield enough. He's Charlie check down. I wonder, Dave, with a pair of new Miami safeties, breaking them in. I'm just saying, maybe this is the game. You mentioned the explosives. Maybe a Trey Wilson, a Badger, or somebody else can slip behind the defense, and we see Graham Mertz push the football, take those downfield shots. I think he's going to be himself, but you know they've been hearing that all offseason about he's the king of the check down. They don't throw downfield. I wonder if they make that a point of emphasis in this game.
No, you'd love to see, you're 100% right. Almost get Trey Wilson involved in like the jet sweep game to make them almost go add another guy into the box and look like you're really just trying to feed the rock to him. Even maybe Montrell Johnson can go. It makes them stay honest. And like you say, you throw off play action and take shots against those two new safeties. You're 100% right. I think that would be a good strategy by Billy Napier. So, I'm kind of interested to see how Florida creates explosive plays offensively in this game and how Lance Guidry from the Miami side tries to limit those.
Dave, let's switch sides to the side of the football. Florida was really bad last year defensively. They've taken many strides to fix that, and as well as replacing a lot of the coaching staff on the defensive side of the football. You had Ron Roberts. You fired the D-line coach, secondary coach. You added some new pieces there. Asa Turner at the safety spot's a guy I'm really excited to see, the transfer from Washington, who's played tons and tons of football. How do you see this matchup, Dave, playing out? Florida's defense against Cam Ward, who, again, is getting all the hype, but we also have to factor in this ball game's in the Swamp. The Swamp is going to be, and one of the reasons, Dave, I'm so excited to go to this game, it is going to be probably the most desperate atmosphere in college football, not just in week one, but maybe throughout the entire season, because that Florida fan base, they know what's on the line. They're going to be rabid. They're going to be nasty. I expect it to be loud on defense all game long. You wonder how talented pieces, but new pieces will handle the atmosphere and handle the improvements also that Florida's made on defense.
No, you're right. I'm wondering how the atmosphere will affect Mario Cristobal. I mean, sometimes he just goes blank. Again, phenomenal recruiter. I'm high on him this year, but that doesn't take away he's not a great game day guy. I think he panics at times. And like you said, does this atmosphere in a close game kind of get to him? I'm interested in seeing that. I do think his offensive line coach, his right-hand guy, Alex Mirabal, will have them ready up front. I mean, they're usually pretty good up front. I mean, they kind of pride themselves. Their head coach is an offensive line guy, and his right-hand guy is the offensive line coach. So they pride themselves on that. They'll be fine. Cam Ward, first start in the Swamp. I'm really interested in seeing that. I'm interested in seeing that transition over from the Pac-12. I mean, they have some weapons on the outside you like. I mean, I love it. Xavier Restrepo. I think he does a good job. Again, I think a big key in this game will be how improved this Florida secondary is. You mentioned, you rattled off some of the names, how they match up against Restrepo.
Their secondary was terrible last year.
Oh, well, just tackling alone. Like Jalen Kimber was horrific last year. Right? It's like they wanted no part of it. But like, how they match up with a guy like Xavier Restrepo or Jacoby George, like does Jason Marshall get his confidence back on the back end for Florida? I think overall he's got
that to me is a key dude they need to step up.
Correct.
I mean,
Devin
decorated
played a
recruit.
lot. You hear a lot about. He's grown. They like him a lot. You're right. Does he improve that? Jordan Castile at the safety spot. You mentioned Asa Turner, who I think is kind of a cerebral. You're reading articles from fall camp, holding guys accountable, kind of being that vocal guy on the back end. Played with, I think, 2 broken hands or 2 hand injuries last year for Washington on their way to playing for a national championship and a Pac-12 championship. So a guy's going to play hurt, bring that it factor. Like, no, guys, like we may be banged up a little bit, but, we're still going to go play with that edge that Florida kind of – me and you were used to growing up seeing Florida defenses playing with like Will Harris, Major Wright, guys on the back end. Where's that physicality? I think how much this Florida secondary's improved will be key. What's the relationship with Ron Roberts, Austin Armstrong? We know Austin Armstrong, he wanted to be aggressive, wanted to go cover 0 last year. Interested to see week 1 how they scheme up against, I think, a really good receiver in Restrepo, but also an under-the-radar kind of guy no one talks about nationally, and Jacoby George from Miami as well.
Dave, before we dive into our predictions, and, they say typically a football team improves the most from week 1 to week 2, right? Week 1 can get kind of squirrely. There's some loose ends. Florida can't afford loose ends, Dave. And I'm talking specifically special teams and self-inflicted wounds. And we've got the special teams mat now with the numbers and everything. Everybody made a big deal of that and how embarrassing that is. You know what's more embarrassing, Dave? Sending 8 out on field goal block, sending 2 guys out with the same number. We saw that in the season opener last year. And I think there's a large portion, Dave, this Florida fan base, maybe even if Florida wins, if they have another blunder like that on special teams, at some point, you are who you are, and it's just part of the culture of your program. I think it is so important for, again, getting the win will probably trump all. Winning cures everything. But it's so important, Dave, in my opinion, and I'm so curious to see. They've heard about it all off season long. Billy's heard about the special teams blunders and, again, the self-inflicted wounds, the stupid things they've done. Do we see a Florida football team that's more cleaned up, more polished, and isn't shooting themselves in the foot? Because I think that's a must for the Gators in this game.
Yeah, and I think they get a bad rap from a standpoint. I mean, you know how many staff members were he hired in different roles and stuff like that. Like, I think that kind of people are like, man, we have this many full-time staff members, and we can't even have 11 guys in the field in our opener. Like, what are we doing? I mean, I know they brought in a new special teams coach from the Patriots, if I remember right, from the NFL. I forget what team. I think it was. I'm like 99% sure it was the Patriots. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. I apologize for that, but I think it was the Patriots. You're right. Let's have a clean operation. Again, Florida fans aren't going to take the pill easy, even if they lose this game. But like you said, let's don't be making the same mistakes we've made over and over again in his previous 2 years in Gainesville. Clean operation will be clean. It will be key. It's like you said, in a game like this where these rosters are this close in week 1, well, there's going to be some mistakes because you're still ironing out some kinks. Those will be the things. Like you said, Florida has too many men on the field where Miami has, a 4th and 4. They're about to punt. You have too many men on the field. You give them a first down, they go down and score. That's the difference in a game. People are going to be like, dude, this isn't even about recruiting or your play calling on offense anymore. This is the basic 2 + 2 = 4 stuff. We're just losing, and that's why we lost.
Dave, it's time. Let's dive into our predictions for this one. The Florida Gators and the Miami Hurricanes, one of the most highly anticipated and certainly most intriguing games of week 1. How do you see it playing out?
Man, this is one you've texted on the side, talked about like the LSU USC game. I don't really have a clue. You could probably throw this one in the category of the big 3 SEC games in week 1. Feel good about Georgia Clemson. This is another one, probably second. I don't feel as good about. Probably obviously first LSU USC. This game being in the swamp, though, I feel like is going to give an advantage. You mentioned it. The fans are going to be relentless. I think there's certain games where the fan base comes into the game kind of being like, we can kind of truly be that 12th man, have an impact on this game. This game is at night, but it is at 3:30. It's going to roll into the night. I think Florida's fan base kind of gets a few extra penalties, maybe a delay a game on Miami's offense, a false start because they can't hear. I think the rosters, again, are very similar 1 through 40, give or take. But I do think Florida's secondary, the improvement on the back end is what we're going to be talking about. I don't know if it goes on for the rest of the year, but I do think week 1, I think we're going to be talking about Florida's secondary willing them to a win in this one. I think Cam Ward, his first start at Miami in the swamp, it's a tough ask. I think Miami's got some difference makers in George and Restrepo, but not enough. I like Florida in a very, very close game here. Something like 31-27, something like that. Florida's defense gets a big stop late. I think that's going to be the improvement. I think guys that just jump to mind. Jason Marshall taking that improvement, and then Devin Moore, Jordan Castile taking that spot. I think we may hear Asa Turner later on as the season goes on, his importance. But I think tonight, I think on Saturday, on August 31st, I think we're talking about the improvement of the Florida secondary. That's tackling. I think they forced a few turnovers. I think that is going to be the difference in the game. I think that's going to be the difference in the game. Florida maybe takes advantage of some bust on Miami on the defensive side of the ball from a standpoint of getting their explosive. I think that's something to see. Two key things before I let you do your prediction, Chris. If you're really trying to figure out how this game's going to work, ask yourself, how does Florida generate explosive plays? Like, just think about that. I mean, Montrell Johnson is not going to be 100%. Trayon Webb, is he ready for that? Florida struggled through fall camp on the right side of the offensive line. How are they creating explosives outside of Eugene Wilson? Because I think Lance Guidry and Miami know that. That's their guy. They're going to try to take that away if they're smart. Then on the opposite side of the ball, what does Florida's secondary do? I think that's going to be the two things you're going to have to ask yourself. I think Florida just makes another play or two, and the crowd wills them to win again. I think it's going to be something like 31-27.
Dave, to your point, I think this is one of those week one games that if it were played on a neutral site or the other venue, I think it would go a long way in changing potentially the way you feel about this one. I think the addition of Ron Roberts defensively isn't talked about enough. His, essentially Austin Armstrong's mentor, he's mentioned that. I'm with you. Love the new additions in the secondary. I think a guy like Jason Marshall Jr., I want to see more out of him, and I think you will. I like Miami. I think they're Cam Ward's a baller. Damian Martinez, the running back. I mean, they're loaded. I mean, they should win this year. They should be in the ACC title game. That roster is built to make that run. It really is. To your point, how does Florida generate those explosives? I would imagine Montrell Johnson's going to play. From talking to Florida folks, I think he's probably – you got week 2 against Samford. You can sit that one out. You can lick your wounds. I think it's going to take a lot for Montrell Johnson to not play in this football game, so I think he will be there. You mentioned it'll be up to Trayon Webb to get the running game going if he doesn't go. The veteran quarterback in Graham Mertz on the home field, I think that's something to really take into account here. I think Arliss Boardingham at tight end is a guy that maybe we're not talking about enough that could be, a weapon to at least take some of the pressure off Trey Wilson. Elijah Badger, I could see having a big game. They're really excited about him, Dave. And then who else? Like, who are the other guys that step up, to your point? Where do the explosive plays come from on the offensive side of the football? But I do trust Graham Mertz. I feel like I know what the floor is and what I'm going to get out of Graham Mertz, and that floor at minimum gives me a chance to win this football game. Can he take the next step, give me more? We talked about earlier, take advantage, over the top, big explosive plays, 2 new safeties for Miami. And then defensively, we talked about. I love the additions at linebacker. Grayson Pup Howard, I think, brings a level of athleticism there for them that I think is going to be – it was much needed. Maybe it was lacking on the defense last year. Secondary's got to be better. Again, if this game was played at a neutral site or in Miami, I probably have a different pick. But, Dave, it's not. It's played in the Swamp. And I mentioned before, I think this crowd is going to be rabid. I think they're desperate. I think the majority of the fan base, they want Billy Napier to work out. And even if they don't, they want to beat Miami. There's no question about it. I think they'll show up with that mentality. I think they will serve as that 12th man. I think it's going to be one of the more entertaining games of week 1, Dave. I think Florida finds a way. They don't make the stupid mistakes they've made. I think that's been such a point of emphasis. I'm not saying it's not going to be a little bit sloppy here and there because it is week 1. It's just that's the nature of the beast. But I don't think Florida makes that back-breaking mistake. And guess what? Believe it or not, maybe I don't trust Billy Napier all that much, but I trust him more than Mario Cristobal. Honestly, like I don't know what I'm getting out of Cristobal in those crunch time moments. We talked about the Georgia Tech game. I think Florida finds a way to make one more big play than Miami. I agree with you. It comes down to a late defensive stop, and I think the Gators pull it out. They get the win. Give me Florida 24, Miami 21, a little bit lower scoring, like I mentioned. To your point, I think it's a lot asking Cam Ward and those new pieces. And how is he going to fit in the offense? We don't know. I mean, as good as he is, we don't know how he's going to fit. He's going to be taking on some competition that is definitely, I think, a step up from what he's faced in the past. I think he feels that. I think the Florida pass rush is for real in this game. They get after him. Cam Warren makes a mistake or two, and I think the Gators pull off a big, much-needed upset win, at least beating the 2.5-point spread, Dave. So I think it's going to be a classic. I really do.
No, I agree too. I mean, the familiarity of, like you said, this is the biggest, loudest environment venue that Cam Ward will ever have played in. It's not a shot to the kid. It just is what it is. I think it's just a fact. You're coming from Incarnate Word and then Washington State. Yeah, I mean, it's a big one. Again, I think he'll go on to have a good season. I like Miami to win the ACC. They don't draw Clemson on the schedule. They may have to beat Florida State twice. I don't think so, but I think they can bounce back after this. I'm just you. Like week one just feels like Florida needs it more. It just feels that, and I feel like you're right. The fans feel that. They feel like, hey, we can have a real say. Obviously, we're not playing, but like we can really make an impact, push them back 5-10 yards to certain penalties on what they get. And I think that's kind of the difference maker. I'm with you. I may feel a little differently if this was a neutral site or even at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami.
One thing's for certain, Dave, it's going to be a classic and one of the best environments in college football this season when the Gators and Canes do battle. Guys, let us know your thoughts. What are your predictions, your picks? How do you feel this one will turn out when Florida takes on Miami in week one? Guys, that's going to do all for us. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms as well as our website, SECUnfiltered.com. For Dave Shumate, I'm Chris Phillips. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, and we'll catch you on the other side.